be the most dominant ideology of the world today. And yeah, that's pretty much true. Yet it's also quite difficult to pin down, so much so that it's sometimes claimed that it's little more than a vague political insult, or even that it doesn't exist. And that stems from the fact that while the average, reasonably politically engaged person could describe what some neoliberal policies might look like, or name some neoliberal politicians, they nonetheless struggle to articulate what neoliberalism actually is more precisely. So it ends up being equated, often erroneously, with things like free market capitalism, libertarianism, the retreat of the state, or classical liberalism. Such confusion is certainly understandable, since many neoliberal policies appear consistent with those labels. But as a whole, its theoretical underpinnings and its implementations are actually quite different to earlier forms of capitalism. So in this video, I'm going to go over the theory, the history, and the effects of neoliberalism, and not just in terms of its effects on economic policy, but rather on all aspects of society. And hopefully, by the end, you'll have a better understanding of it. Part 1. The birth of neoliberalism. The name neoliberalism implies a new liberalism, so it's important to go over how it differs from earlier liberal thought and when and why this break occurred. In 1938, many of the thinkers who would soon come to shape the future of liberalism gathered in Paris for the Walter Lippmann Colloquium, named for American journalist Walter Lippmann, who had recently released his book The Good Society. In it, he posited that the trend towards more direct government economic management that began in developed capitalist nations during the Great Depression, exemplified by the New Deal in the USA and Keynesian macroeconomic management, risked leading to a gradual collectivization that would be the death knell of liberalism. Among the most notable in attendance were the German economist Wilhelm Röpke and two Austrian economists, Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek. And yes, I'm going to be butchering every single German and French name in this video. Sorry. Thus, these theorists sought to construct a new liberalism, one that could remedy the problems of the classical liberal ideas that had led to the Great Depression, while also challenging the spread of state-directed economic policy. It's here that they coined the term neoliberalism in its modern sense, and established its two main fundamentals going forward. Firstly, they refuted the classical liberal dogma that capitalist markets were a naturally occurring, self-regulating phenomenon, and thus should be subject only to extremely limited state involvement, the doctrine known as laissez-faire. This is best illustrated in this passage from Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations, released in 1776, one of the foundational texts of both classical liberalism and the field of economics in general. The human body frequently preserves, to all appearances at least, the most perfect state of health under a vast variety of different diets, even under some which are generally believed to be far from being perfectly wholesome. But the healthful state of the human body, it would seem, contains in itself some unknown principle of preservation, capable either of preventing or of correcting, in many respects, the bad effects even of a very faulty regimen. In the political body, the natural effort which every man is continually making to better his own condition is a principle of preservation capable of preventing and correcting, in many respects, the bad effects of a political economy, in some degree, both partial and oppressive. The wisdom of nature has fortunately made ample provision for remedying many of the bad effects of the folly and injustice of man, in the same manner as it has done in the natural body for remedying those of his sloth and intemperance. Rather than subscribe to this taken for granted belief, the neoliberals instead held that the market is a human construction, so therefore a strong state of some description is needed in order to ensure its good functioning, rather than a state that would actively pursue the commonly stated goals of the economic policy of the day, such as economic growth, full employment, and social welfare. They instead envisioned a government that would be the guarantor and creator of markets, with few intentional policies directed towards any end beyond that. This may sound like anti-interventionism, but this is not the case. It's just a different type of interventionism to the one that term is usually associated with. Rather than intervening to try and actively better certain metrics or quality of life indicators, the government instead intervenes to create markets, keep them functioning, and enforce the rules that it sets for those who operate within them. Thus, the common perception of neoliberalism as a borderline anti-statist ideology that is little more than a mere revival of classical liberal-esque free market capitalism is clearly inaccurate. Their second big departure from classical liberalism is in the prime virtue that they extol. Earlier theorists, such as David Ricardo and Adam Smith, had believed that the greatest merit of capitalist markets was their fostering of mutually beneficial exchange. This is epitomized in Adam Smith's famous invisible hand analogy, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. By pursuing his own interests, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. So, the classical liberals were intimately concerned with getting results that benefited human beings. They were quite utilitarian in that respect. Thus, the reason they supported laissez-faire style markets is because they believed that they would foster mutually beneficial exchange that would improve the lives of everyone involved. As the French philosophers Dardot and Laval put it, with the general increase in average productivity deriving from specialization brought by the Industrial Revolution, everyone gains from exchange. This is not a logic that eliminates the worst economic subjects, but one of complementarity, which improves the efficiency and well-being of even the worst producers. Certainly, those who do not wish to respect the rules of the game must be left to their fate, but those who join in cannot lose. The neoliberals, on the other hand, emphasize competition above all else. An illustrative description of this comes from the French philosopher Louis Rougier, an attendee at the colloquium. The liberal state should exercise power in such a way as to protect liberty, not subjugate it, in such a way that winning an advantage is the outcome of the victory of the fittest in a fair competition, not the privilege of the best protected or the best off due to the state's hypocritical support. The difference here is stark. One is a philosophy of mutual benefit that is intimately concerned with human welfare, and the other necessarily creates losers and plainly embraces this with phrases like the victory of the fittest. Such a focus is profoundly undemocratic, as in a democratic society, the losers in such a system will inevitably seek to influence politics to improve their circumstances. Thus, some of them advocated for the limiting of democracy to ensure that the masses could not ruin the competitive market order with their political demands. As Rougier also wrote, democracies must be constitutionally reformed in such a way that those to whom they entrust the responsibilities of government regard themselves not as the representatives of economic interests and popular appetites, but as the guarantors of the general interests against special interests, not as the instigators of electoral one-upmanship, but as the moderators of group demands, setting as their task the enforcement of universal respect for the common rules of individual competition and collective agreements, preventing active minorities or visionary majorities from distorting to their advantage the fairness of the fight that should ensure the selection of elites for the benefit of all. They must inculcate in the masses, through the voice of new teachers, respect for qualifications, and the honor of collaborating on a common project. This passage advocates for any real notion of democracy to be thrown away, in favor of a government of elites who utilize their monopoly on violence to enforce the competitive market order, with the general population being educated in such a way as to cause a fundamental change in their mentality, to make them accepting of the new norm of competition, along which they would govern their actions. This way, they could be properly integrated into the market and would be more willing to conform to its norms. These are not at all uncommon prescriptions among the founding thinkers of neoliberalism. Lippmann and Hayek both advocated for similar, with Hayek in particular later outlining his ideal government, one in which only men of substantial property property aged at least 45 would be allowed to vote and run for political office, with elections only being held every 15 years. This is in stark contrast to most of the significant classical liberal thinkers, such as for John Locke, who held that majority consent for government action was crucial. So, from the very beginning then, neoliberalism was based around the state establishing and/or maintaining a competitive market order whose winners, the holders of capital, would govern over the losers, workers as well as those incapable of or unwilling to earn their daily bread. Everything about this so obviously serves to protect the interests of the former group from those of the latter. Nonetheless, these theorists believe that preventing the masses from exercising proportionate political influence was required in order to assure all individuals complete freedom and liberty. These are words with many different meanings. To me, for example, no one who needs to struggle to meet their basic needs, such as securing food, housing, and healthcare, is truly free. So it's important to clarify that for them, it simply meant the freedom to compete in supposedly fair capitalist markets. Therefore, they didn't see any contradiction between this freedom and a practically dictatorial government made up exclusively of large property owners. As long as said property owners did their duty and ensured the good functioning of the competitive market, everyone would be free. The idea that competition should be the prime aspect of social relations and the social Darwinist rhetoric used by some neoliberal theorists was not new. It has its roots in the writings of Herbert Spencer, a 19th century English philosopher. Spencer believed in social evolutionism, that humanity would become stronger if everyone was simply left to compete in the free market. But he did not believe that this would be thanks to mutually beneficial exchange, as most other liberals of his time did. It was because the weakest would be unable to survive, which would strengthen society overall. He explained this in his own words in 1851. The poverty of the incapable, the distresses that come upon the imprudent, the starvation of the idle, and those shoulderings aside of the weak by the strong, which leave so many in shallows and in miseries, are the decrees of a large, far-seeing benevolence. Spencer's thought had some key differences to that of the neoliberals, most notably in the justification. They mostly justified their ideas by appealing to freedom and liberty rather than his notion of social evolutionism. And unlike them, Spencer was fundamentally anti-statist, believing that any government attempts to provide relief for the poor or interfere in the natural market would end up making society weaker. But regardless of their different reasons for emphasizing the primacy of competition, they both still pursued similar ends. The implication here is that the cost of the freedom and liberty which the primacy of competition supposedly provides is that those who cannot make it in the market will meet a dire fate. Spencer embraced that fate as a deserved punishment that made society stronger, while most of the founding neoliberals were merely indifferent to it, rarely even factoring it into their theories. Whether this competition was materially good for most people or not was only ever a secondary concern, at best. Part 2. From Theory to Practice. Plans to make the Walter Lippmann Colloquium an annual event were scrapped due to the outbreak of World War II. But in the 5 days that it was held, the most important underpinnings of what was to become neoliberalism had already been laid out. Its agenda was continued afterwards by the 1947 foundation of the Mont Pelerin Society, which could be considered the very first neoliberal think tank. An initiative led by Friedrich Hayek, most of the attendees of the colloquium joined up, including the aforementioned Wilhelm Röpke. Röpke is notable for being one of the most important contributors to the reconstruction of the post-World War II German economy, alongside others who are known as the Order Liberals. Note that Röpke did not call himself an Order Liberal, but there's very little that distinguishes his theory from theirs, so I'll be grouping him in with them for convenience's sake. He and they were some of the founders of Germany's famed social market economy. This is commonly understood to be a form of redistributive capitalism, as post-war Germany is well known for its very strong welfare state, and in practice it was. But it would be an error to credit the Order Liberals for this. Such programs had their roots in Bismarck's reforms during the 19th century, and the German working class was very unionized, meaning that overt attacks on social programs and worker protections would not have been very practical. In fact, the Order Liberals' original conception of the term social market economy meant something very different. The man who coined the phrase, Alfred Muller Armack, a close associate of Ropke and a fellow member of the Montpellier Society, said that the reason this market economy was social was simply because it encouraged consumption, which he described as a social service, and because the competitive order would enhance productivity, which would guarantee social progress. Thus, for the ordo-liberals, the social in social market economy did not mean social guarantees or welfare or anything like how the term is usually understood today. It meant little more than the maintenance of competition, which by itself was considered to be more than enough of a social good. Laval and Dardot summarized the ordo-liberal position on such social programs thusly. In its ordo-liberal sense, social market economy is an expression directly opposed to the welfare or social state. Prosperity for all is a result of the market economy and it alone, whereas the social security and various allowances allocated by the social state, doubtless a necessary evil but a temporary one that must be restricted as much as possible, risk demoralizing economic agents. The limited programs that they conceived of to encompass this necessary evil would only be justified because they were directed not towards providing people with their basic needs, but to help them adapt to the competitive market order. The conception of a government that helps people not to directly help them, but to help them help themselves, quite common today, was first popularized by Ropke and other German theorists of his day. Beforehand, it was much more common for such government programs to simply be justified as universal economic rights. Just look at Franklin D. Roosevelt's proposed Second Bill of Rights, for example. Every American has the right to a job, an adequate wage and decent living standards, a decent home, medical care, economic protection during sickness, accident, old age or unemployment, and a good education. So we move from the idea that everyone has the unconditional right to have their basic needs fulfilled to the idea that no one has the right to anything beyond maybe getting a little bit of help to adapt to the competitive market order and earn their basic needs themselves. The basis of Ropke and other similar German economists' thought was thus the two neoliberal fundamentals that I outlined. According to them, since a well-functioning market was not natural and self-regulating as the classical liberals had thought, the role of government is to remedy this by establishing and maintaining a competitive market order and ensuring that the population conforms to it. Thus, the German ordo-liberals were the original politically influential neoliberals, 3 decades before the global neoliberal turn of the 70s and 80s. Ropke saw this all as a part of a fundamental societal change. He wrote that an effective, lasting economic reform must at the same time be a radical reform of society. In order for the government-maintained competitive market order to function, society as a whole would need to be made to adapt to it. The individual, the family unit, the government department, etc. They must all conduct and conceive of themselves as an enterprise embroiled in never-ending competition, and none of them should be the beneficiaries of any government intervention that is not primarily aimed at maintaining the health of the market. And while the ordo-liberals, despite their influence, were largely unsuccessful in totalizing such a model in post-war Germany, the more thorough implementations of neoliberalism that came later were clearly influenced by them. Another important school of neoliberal thought, led by the aforementioned Friedrich Hayek, was also quite prominent. Hayek was an economist of the Austrian school, most well known for its rejection of things like mathematical modeling. That is largely irrelevant here, though, as we're mostly interested in his more philosophical ideas about how society ought to be. While both schools shared much in common, they nonetheless had one significant disagreement, which came down to what the government should do. Hayek agreed that competition was king, and that a good competitive market order was not simply a force of nature that could function without a state. But while others thought that the government should construct and maintain this order, Hayek took a more social evolutionist approach. For him, the rules of the game that would create the freest and fairest competitive markets were to be found in the social conventions which societies would spontaneously create to regulate themselves over time through trial and error. These rules, once widely accepted, would then inevitably come to be formally codified in common law established in the courts through legal precedents. A strong government with a monopoly on violence was required required to enforce these rules, guarantee contracts and private property rights, etc., but said government should keep its legislating to a bare minimum, as laws established through legislation are the conscious creations of politicians. Thus, they would disrupt the subconsciously constructed common law market order. Hence Hayek's aforementioned preference for an undemocratic government of landed, enlightened elites who would have the good sense to ignore the majority who might misguidedly push them to interfere in the market unfairly. In 1981, he even stated that he prefers a liberal dictator to a democratic government lacking in liberalism. While the order liberals were at least somewhat influential in formal politics in the 40s, 50s and 60s, Hayek, at least in terms of his different idea of how the state should act, was not so much. But he was still very influential in a different way. As the founder and long-time leader of the Montellerine Society, he was at the head of what quickly became a transcontinental network of think tanks, which were created to advocate for the practical implementation of neoliberal ideas, alongside business-funded university economics departments, notably at the London School of Economics and Chicago University. The most illustrative example of these neoliberal think tanks is the British Institute of Economic Affairs. It was founded after millionaire businessman Anthony Fisher read Hayek's 1945 book, The Road to Serfdom, and then sought him out in person. Fisher had intended to enter politics to advocate for Hayek's ideas against what he saw as the threat of communism posed by the social programs and nationalizations being implemented by the post-war UK Labour government. But Hayek convinced him to instead use his substantial fortune to found a think tank, as he believed that this was a much more effective way of influencing government policy. This meeting would have a resounding effect on global politics, as the Institute quickly became the most influential think tank in the UK, directly influencing policy from the 1970s onwards. And Fisher would go on to found many more think tanks, advocating for the same ideas, with his Atlas network today comprising more than 500 worldwide. As may be indicated from the fact that their founder was a rich businessman, these think tanks and others like them, such as the Heritage Foundation in the USA, are funded by donations from corporations and the rich and powerful the world over. Hayek never outright said that his prescriptions were meant to favor businesses and the rich. In fact, he argued that the absolute freedom that his ideas would provide would be for the benefit of all. Regardless, though, the fact that they were so eagerly picked up, funded, and advocated for by these interests practically from the very second that he had published them certainly indicates that they thought that they stood to benefit quite handsomely from their implementation. This advocacy must be understood in the context of the post-World War II economic order in the US and Europe. Like the aforementioned Labour Party in the UK, many governments had implemented or strengthened social programs and taken more direct control of their economies than before the war, and especially more than they had before the Great Depression. This was underpinned by the global monetary system set up during the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944, which pegged the currencies of its signatories to the gold standard, set up international economic rules, the most important being free trade between member states, and established financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, with the former originally intended to be a fund from which member states could draw to stave off economic crises. This was thus the era of embedded liberalism, a relatively stable economic order with safeguards in place that made it possible for many of the states involved to implement the most generous social programs in their histories, with economic policy being guided by the pursuit of concrete utilitarian goals such as full employment. This norm was also doubtlessly influenced by the desire to save capitalism. The Cold War had begun immediately following World War II, and most of these governments were worried that communist ideas would take hold if they were to completely neglect the interests of their working class population. This is clearly illustrated in the fact that even most of the conservative governments of the day didn't dare try to roll back these reforms. Thus, class compromise was negotiated between the working class and the capitalist owner class. Beforehand, the latter rarely had to make any real concessions, and so this also quickly became the era in which the working class within these nations was arguably the most powerful that it had ever been. But this power, however little or great it may have been, had been taken from the capitalists, who wanted it back. Hence the aforementioned boom in their advocacy for neoliberalism, as many of them astutely recognized that, whether it was the intention of the neoliberal theorists or not, extending the maximum of competition to all aspects of society would greatly advantage them and thus help to restore the power that they had lost. This brings us to the 1970s. Part 3. The neoliberal turn. The Bretton Woods system that had enabled embedded liberalism began to show cracks in the 60s, with stagflation, high rates of inflation, slowing economic growth, and high unemployment being widespread around the world, resulting in material consequences for wage earners that were one factor behind the famed global protests of 1968. This culminated in the USA abandoning the gold standard which had underpinned that system in 1971, and then finally the global oil crises of 1973 and 1979 would definitively cause the bubble to burst. Thus, the way was opened for a shift to something new, and the widespread advocacy for neoliberalism that had been steadily ramping up over the prior 3 decades made it a prime candidate. Its first practical implementation was forced upon Chile by a military dictatorship. In 1975, after Augusto Pinochet seized near total control of the government following power struggles within the military junta, which itself had seized power 2 years earlier, he brought a group of Chilean economists known as the Chicago Boys in. They were dubbed as such because they had been trained at the aforementioned University of Chicago as part of a US government-funded program to counteract leftist influence in Latin America. These economists then came to dominate the economics department at the deeply conservative Catholic University of Santiago, with the help of funding from the Chilean business class. A part of that campaign that had led to the coup against the democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende. It was, however, not Hayek who trained them in Chicago. It was Milton Friedman. Friedman was an American economist and another member of the Mont Pelerin Society who became prominent in the 1960s through his advocacy for neoliberalism in the US, and who eventually came to replace Hayek as the Chicago School's most prominent economist. While highly influenced by Hayek, Friedman's conception of neoliberalism was more in line with Röpke's. He emphasized that the state needs to take an active role in shaping the competitive market order. He laid this out very clearly in his 1951 paper, Neoliberalism and Its Prospects. Neoliberalism would accept the 19th century liberal emphasis on the fundamental importance of the individual, but it would substitute for the 19th century goal of laissez-faire as a means to this end, the goal of the competitive order. It would seek to use competition among producers to protect consumers from exploitation, competition among employers to protect workers and owners of property, and competition among consumers to protect the enterprises themselves. The state would police the system, establish conditions favorable to competition and prevent monopoly, provide a stable monetary framework, and relieve acute misery and distress. The citizens would be protected against the state by the existence of a free private market, and against one another by the preservation of competition. Friedman made a number of policy prescriptions which were implemented to their fullest in Chile, thanks largely to its lack of the pesky inconvenience known as democracy. The theorized perfect competitive market order was established there to possibly the greatest extent that it has been anywhere in the world thus far, aside from perhaps in occupied Iraq by the US following the Second Iraq War. Practically every sector in the country was swiftly turned into a competitive market, with most forms of controls being relaxed and most state industries being privatized, sans the copper industry, which remained nationalized in order to fund the state. International trade was opened up and foreign companies were allowed to extract profits without limit. Here's some of the most notable examples of specific policies. The pension system was privatized. A new market was therefore formed of companies competing to invest workers' retirement savings, which the workers have no choice but to engage in as such saving is mandatory. This system has, however, not been very good for anyone aside from those companies, as more than 80% of retirees only have pensions worth $400 a month, which is far below the cost of living and less than minimum wage. Widespread dislike of this system has been a factor in many protest movements, most recently in late 2019. In the education sector, Milton Friedman's most famous policy idea was implemented, a school voucher system, where the state gives every family a funding voucher which allows them to choose which school their children should attend, rather than the more common system of public school catchments where only those who live nearby can attend. Thus, schools must now compete for students, with the government fully subsidizing the creation of a new competitive market that did not previously exist at all. A great example of how neoliberalism is not remotely against government spending, provided that it's done in a way that furthers the principle of competition. As a result, from 1973 to 2014, the percentage of students in public education went from 80% to just 40%, and Chile now has the most socio-economically segregated school system in the OECD. The previously universal healthcare system was also privatized, creating two more competitive markets, one in private healthcare provision and the other in private insurance. Both industries, much like that of the aforementioned pension industry, were funded through coercive measures imposed by the state. Workers are legally obliged to set aside a portion of their wage to contribute to a for-profit health insurance fund, which the insurance companies then use to pay private hospitals for their care. This is another example of a by-the-book neoliberal policy. The state forces everyday workers to fund new competitive industries, which, as the theory goes, actually increases freedom, since more market competition equals more freedom. That workers are quite literally forced to finance these new markets is not an issue of restrained freedom, according to neoliberal doctrine, due to the incredibly narrow conception that it has of the term. This competition shifted the focus of the healthcare system from overall public health, with an emphasis on primary care and preventative medicine, to profit-driven curative medicine. Whatever macroeconomic benefits this prototypical implementation of neoliberalism may have had were short-lived. By the end of Pinochet's reign in 1989, poverty had risen from 28% to 42%, extreme poverty from 9% to 12%, and the daily caloric intake of the bottom 20% of income earners fell from 1,925 to 1,474. What these reforms did accomplish, however, was to shift the nation's distribution of wealth in favor of the rich. In 1969, the income share of the wealthiest fifths of the Chilean population was 44.5%, as compared with 7.6% for the poorest fifth. By 1988, that ratio was 54.6% to 4.4%. Pinochet also banned trade unions and made strikes illegal. These were prescriptions that originated with Hayek himself, as one of his most enduring legacies is his idea that unions are one of the biggest barriers to the good functioning of competitive markets. According to him, they aim to gain unfair benefits for workers by coercing employers and politicians with their collective power, rather than by earning them through market competition. Thus, the restoration of class power to the owners of capital went beyond simple wealth redistribution. The very structures of working class power were also dismantled. Whether the theorists had intended it or not, their ideology had been proven in practice to suit elite interests very well, and others took note, the most famous among them being President Ronald Reagan in the US and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the UK. Both conservatives, their policy positions were heavily influenced by the aforementioned neoliberal think tanks, the Heritage Foundation for Reagan and the Institute of Economic Affairs for Thatcher. Side note, the Affordable Care Act in the US, the celebrated, supposedly progressive healthcare policy of President Obama, is actually a very neoliberal policy, originally conceived by the same Heritage Foundation who provided Reagan with most of his platform. Thatcher was a follower of Hayek herself. In 1981, she stated that, "I am a great admirer of Professor Hayek." These two, however, operated in countries that were at least nominally democratic, so they could not simply implement neoliberal reforms wholesale, as was possible under Chile's dictatorship. Thatcher, for example, would have committed political suicide if she had proceeded with privatizing the UK's public healthcare system, so they altered their rhetoric to compensate. The government was too big, it spent too much, it had too much authority, and it needed to be made smaller for the good of all. In practice, this was not the true aim. It was simply a strategy to legitimize the normalization of generalized competition, an endeavor which was often implemented and funded by the government itself, as in Chile. A slew of privatizations followed, creating new competitive markets. Social programs were either gutted due to being incompatible with the competitive market order, or reorientated towards integrating individuals into it, and both did their very best to crush the power of unions, though they were not able to ban them outright as Pinochet had. Thatcher, in particular, introduced competition into practically every sphere that she got her hands on, often in ways that may not be so immediately obvious. Public services, for example, were reorganized along competitive lines. They were divided into different independent agencies that were made to compete with one another, each trying to justify its budget and existence by attracting the most consumers. Even when pragmatic concerns meant that involving the private sector was not possible, there were still ways in which the competitive principle could be implemented. And when private companies were involved, the state would be made to compete with them. One example is the introduction of compulsory competitive tendering, a system by which most local services had to be put up for open bids, with contracts awarded based on value for money. This meant that local governments, who would usually conceive of, implement, and run municipal services themselves, things like garbage collection, for example, would now have to compete for the privilege of actually running their own services with private companies. This inevitably led to these local authorities being reorganized along competitive lines. But perhaps her most celebrated policy was the rent-to-buy scheme. Public housing was sold to its tenants at a big discount, in what, on the surface, may seem like an excellent policy with no ulterior motives. You know, people owning their own homes, what's not to like? But the goal of this policy was not so simply to house people. As you may have guessed already, it had a whole lot more to do with fostering competition. Part of the money from each sale went to the local governments who had built and maintained said houses, but they were prohibited from using that money to build more. Thus, the actual intent of this policy was to cut into the stock of social housing, and thus reduce it as much as possible, as such government-provided subsidized rentals constitute an anti-competitive intervention in the market, rather than being passed on to a new tenant with government-subsidized rent once the previous one left. These houses would instead be in private hands and eventually be rented or sold on the private market just like any others. An excellent example of how neoliberalization can actually be quite insidious. Similar competition-focused reforms were instituted in many other countries through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, not just in the so-called global north, but also in the global south. In the latter, however, they were usually imposed by force, such as through military dictatorships or through coercive measures taken by international financial institutions, such as the IMF and World Bank. After 1982, with the Bretton Woods system long dead, these institutions drastically changed direction and became the harbingers of the new neoliberal order. Their bailouts and loans, which many countries needed after the crisis-filled 70s and 80s, started to come with conditions that the receiving countries imposed competitive market reforms, much like those that were implemented in Chile, Britain, and the US, often with disastrous consequences. In addition, they were made to open up their economies to international trade and submit to participation in the new neoliberal international order, one which would later be solidified by the 1995 founding of the World Trade Organization. Thus, even countries themselves have begun to conduct themselves as competitive enterprises, whose primary concern is to attract investors and ensure them returns. All of this has also coincided with the rapid financialization of capital. A huge power shift occurred. Productive capital, as in businesses that seek to profit from production or extraction, became far less important compared to finance capital, enterprises that seek to profit from investments in things like stocks. This shift was so significant that the very line between such enterprises has become muddied. Nowadays, even most big companies which are traditionally associated with production are now also heavily involved in the finance industry and often gain more of their profits through the latter. In 1983, the total global daily turnover of financial transactions was $2.3 billion US. By 2001, only 18 years later, this had increased to 130 billion. This represented an annual turnover of 40 trillion, which is more than 40 times the estimated $800 billion that it would have cost to support all yearly international trade and productive investments. That means that only 2.5% of annual turnover globally is actually doing anything materially useful. This shift was enabled by policy decisions. Neoliberalism obviously mandates that, just like in all other spheres, financial markets must too be opened up to the principle of competition. And after the crises of the 70s and 80s and the collapse of Bretton Woods, financial capital received a huge boost as states turned to the financing of public debt more than ever before. This rapid financialization, in turn, had a drastic effect.
What's going on there, everybody? Hope you're all having a fantastic day today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I really wanted to go ahead and put this video out there because things are happening in the gaming scene that I am not too pleased with, and I don't like the direction a lot of these games are taking. And sadly, the death of XDefiant leads us towards this direction. Now, of course, you know, them announcing XDefiant's dying has really put a toll onto those people who are playing the game itself. I can't get any lobbies, ladies and gentlemen. I've tried. I was one of the people who wanted to grind out XDefiant until the day that they finally shut down the server because I enjoyed the game. But sadly, for mouse and keyboard players, that is just simply impossible right now. It really is. I can't find anybody. And when
I mean, because they unlocked everything. That was such a bad idea. Like they hate us. It's like, well, whatever, fuck it. Here's all the skins, here's all the camos unlocked. Here. But they sure like give us 4 XP. Let us grind it out. Let us finish it up. Let us do the grind. But no, we couldn't even do that. We can still do it, but it's like, what's the point? They just don't get. They just don't understand game. They shouldn't be in the gaming business. Anyone who made this decision, like, really fuck themselves. I don't know if they fuck the community, but they. XDefiant's so good. Had so much room to grow. I was looking forward to new maps coming, and just one day, poof, nope, gone by. Like, my worst gaming experience ever with XDefiant. I've been here, I've played beta, day 1, started grinding. It's really out of touch, man.
tried to, you know, get a little crossplay with some homies who are playing on controller, then we both can't find games. And it's hilarious because when they back out and find a game on their own, they instantly get into a match. But when they party up with me, we're sitting there for an hour plus trying to get into a game. It's really bad, guys. It's a bummer. And yes, them announcing it so early has definitely ruined the holiday season for a lot of players when it comes to being able to play this game. But that's not the only thing that is happening, like I said. As we all know, XDefiant, one of the biggest points of this game is the fact that it did not have skill-based matchmaking. Now, of course, it did have some parameters that it follows, like, you know, making sure the party size is included and making sure you're in the correct region and making sure it connects you to your input, you know, so on and so forth. But when it came to skill level, no, it was a free-for-all. It really was. Every single game that you got into, you had no clue who you were going to go ahead and verse, you know? You might see a few names that you recognize because it's connecting you to the same region and wants to get you the best ping. So, you know, if it finds people who have the best connection to you, you might see them a decent amount. But other than that, I mean, it's not trying to intentionally find someone who is going to be equal skill levels down to the finest of details to make sure that you have the most competitive experience within the casual side of the game. It didn't do that. And that was a huge factor for this game. And I said many times before, and I think a lot of other people said this as well, that if XDefiant fails, if XDefiant dies, this will be the basically the end of our run when it comes to no skill-based matchmaking. We've tried again and again and again to basically share our opinions about skill-based matchmaking and how it's affecting, you know, gaming and making it impossible for a lot of people to be able to play with one another. We've been trying to spread this. But of course, our words mean nothing. Let's be honest. We tried to boycott back in Black Ops, you know, Cold War. Every single year, the biggest talking point is skill-based matchmaking. Is it not? I mean, every single time a new COD game drops, what's trending on Twitter? Skill-based matchmaking. It's the hottest topic ever, yet and still we never see a change. And it's so popular to the point that pretty much every single game uses it. It's just horrifying. It's horrifying, honestly. And we finally got a game that removed it. This was our project, you know? Even for the people who didn't enjoy XDefiant, they still wanted to see this game succeed because it's taking that step. It's doing something for this community that we were never able to do before. The only thing we could do is put out a freaking petition that's useless. This is a game. It's a physical game that's backing up our concepts. And if it fails, I think we all sadly knew the results that would follow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry this has to be my first introduction into Delta Force on this channel because I did want to cover this game. I actually made a few videos before, and the reason I'm not covering it so, deep right now is because I'm a little worried about, how YouTube is going to take it. As you guys know, usually when it comes to gaming, you want to stick in your lane, and when you start, flopping around to too many different titles, YouTube doesn't like that. And Battlefield compared to COD, massively different games. Although I'm a huge Battlefield fan, I've been following it forever. I love it. I play it every single year. I used to talk about it, but I'm nervous about making content. I'm going to do it sometime in the future, but I had to make this point because it's so sad to know, because as we all know, Battlefield doesn't run off of skill-based matchmaking, right? It's team balancing. That's it. Because in a game with that many players, it just simply doesn't work. And you want to make sure everybody has the best connection because you're playing with so many individuals. You don't want to be having 32 players with horrible connection on big maps where, had to shoot across. No. That would destroy a game like Battlefield, right? It's just team balancing. Get the best connection, and then you balance out the teams, and you're basically good to go. And even before that, because that's only in 2042, before that, we have a server browser, right? The server browser is the bread and butter of what, Battlefield is, because it allows you to find the best connection possible at all times. And again, you can't have skill-based matchmaking in a server browser. But Delta Force coming out here, I was hoping that it would, fill that void for a lot of players in the Battlefield scene who are looking for something to play, since obviously 2042 isn't the best Battlefield game out there. And also, they're pretty much done updating it and supporting until the new Battlefield game drops. So, this game is phenomenal. It really is. It's fun, and it's great for a lot of Battlefield fans to be able to get a different fix. I think of Delta Force as like the XDefiant, to Call of Duty. Delta Force is to Battlefield. It's great for the community. They need competition, and this is what the players, need and want. And again, like I said, I play it. It's fun. But they are incorporating skill-based matchmaking into a game that just doesn't logically make sense whatsoever. I actually have the post right here where they're trying to cover it up a little bit on Reddit. You guys can read it for yourself because there's plenty of videos that have already discussed this. Basically, the moral of the story here is that in the very beginning, they are going to protect the noobs. They're going to, seriously, you're never going to see a brand new player in Delta Force whatsoever. But eventually, they're going to graduate to the rest of the pool. You know what I'm saying? Like how XDefiant is. You have the welcome playlist, and then once you reach a certain level, you are, out with the rest of the players. But it's not completely like XDefiant because they're still going to be tracking your actual skill level. Now, not as in-depth, right? It's not going to be as crazy as Call of Duty where it's every fine, even down to your movement, right? Map knowledge, how slow your sensitivity probably is. Now, none of that noise. But they're still tracking skill. They're still trying to make sure not lobbies are 50-50 24/7, but they want to have a certain balance that the matchmaking, brings forth. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why are they doing this? Battlefield doesn't need, I know it's not Battle, I always say Battlefield, but you know what I'm talking about. The concept of Battlefield, like how, again, XDefiant is to Call of Duty, Delta Force is to Battlefield. The idea of what Battlefield is, it doesn't need skill-based matchmaking. It never did need skill-based matchmaking. I was actually watching a video from Enders the other day. I'll actually pop up the video that I was watching in specific where he was discussing the skill-based matchmaking here. And he made a phenomenal point. I'm sorry I have to steal this real quick, but I have to re-say it because it's just genius. And I never in a million years thought of, thinking of it this way. But in a game that's styled like Battlefield, skill-based matchmaking does nothing but hurt the overall experience because it's unlike Call of Duty, Battlefield has a roles to fill, right? And again, he was explaining how the Sweat's mindset is. It's true. I'm a Sweat as well. I can confirm that the majority of us are going to just, lean over to the assault classes, maybe a medic class, and just try to go for frags all the time. But in Delta Force, we're beginning to run into a problem where that's all people are running. You're not seeing many engineers, and the sniper players, recon players, not really playing, good recon. They're just playing it to get those extremely long, long shot kills, not really, wanting to play the true role of recon. And, skill-based matchmaking just completely destroys this because Obviously, in a typical Battlefield experience with no skill-based matchmaking, you have variety. You have players who enjoy going around repairing vehicles or, taking out vehicles, or players who are spotting for their team and getting a bunch of pings and a bunch of assists for that. You have players like this, but they're not entering, some of our brackets because, the matchmaking is putting us with, once again, players of our similar skill. And what do sweats enjoy doing? We like sweating it out, so the whole lobbies are filled with assault players and medics and people just using the best of the best, the typical stuff. It doesn't belong in Delta Force whatsoever. But it's so weird because this wasn't a talking point when Delta Force was in its first initial, phase, the alpha. I remember playing the alpha. A lot of you guys played the alpha. We were discussing this game during that time frame. I did not witness this at all. It wasn't a talking point. Nobody even felt it, right? I would say over half the player base didn't feel the increasing layers of the matchmaking as they do now. And then out of the blue, when X Defiant is saying bye-bye, this is coming to life. I'm telling you guys, X Defiant was one of the only games that would ever have the nuts to remove skill-based matchmaking. I'm being dead ass with you. There's not a single game out there that doesn't have some type of matchmaking, system incorporated. And when I say this, I'm not saying it has to be to the levels of Call of Duty where it's very incorporated, but they have it to a certain degree. Literally, X Defiant was all about ping. That's it. Ping, how many people are in your party, and your input. That's literally it. No skill needed. If you can't hang, you can't hang, right? It is what it is, but at the same time, you will eventually find a casual game. You will. It's going to come along. It's going to trickle along, but it gives you that sense of progression throughout the game. But I really do believe around the time of COVID, where Modern Warfare 2019 was out and all this stuff, when skill-based matchmaking was heavily incorporated, things changed, and I think people got way too used to having their hands held and being walked through these games, these experiences, not needing to complete it all, but being able to stick in their own tiny little bracket, never experiencing what a potential better player would be, never seeing what that would be, and never wanting to, obtain that status or that level of gameplay because you never had to put up with it, You're just sitting there versing the same style of people again and again and again and again, and you already think you're probably the best. You probably think you're hot shit because, you're at near the top of that bracket. But you never have to go to that next level. And when you do go to that next level and you get wiped, they put you right back down into your own bracket. It's not like X Defiant where it's consistent, And sometimes you do get 10 matches of versing people who are a little bit above your bracket. Forget about X Defiant. Let's talk about OG COD. I remember back in the day getting people who were above my bracket in COD 4, 1 at 4, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2. And guess what? Sometimes I even stayed in the game. I wanted to verse them. I wanted to, get whooped. You know what I'm saying? Because they gave me more knowledge because I wanted to get to that point to be able to stomp out just as easy, right? That is not a thing because once you do get stomped out, once the matchmaking sees you're, a little bit out of your range, it pushes you right back with your group. This system is now completely pushed into the minds of many, many players out there and paired with the failure of X Defiant and the game shutting down. I guarantee that it's going to be cemented in history, and it's never going to be able to, we're not going to be able to phase away from it. I'm even worried about the next actual Battlefield game, because realistically, they took away the server browser in 2042. If there's no server browser in the next Battlefield game, I guarantee, they're going to be trying to incorporate some type of matchmaking algorithm. But ladies and gentlemen, that's all I really have for you guys. I just wanted to go ahead and discuss my opinions about, basically the topic of skill-based matchmaking being a permanent addition in pretty much every game you can think of nowadays, especially paired with, X Defiant. It's not looking good. It really is not looking good, and it seems like people are pushing for it more than ever before. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, leave a like. If you hated, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to us daily here at 8 1 Eastern Time. Of course, if you guys are interested in my live streams, I'm open live today over on Twitch, starting between 12 and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You guys find a link to that channel down in the description of this video. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all next one. Peace out.
Taking Alpha. We're losing Charlie. Hostile RCX in your area.
it up
Enemy
early.
RTXD detected. Securing Alpha.
They try to use societal standards for speech to deter people from my message. My dream has come true.
So if you haven't heard about Wes Watson, I encourage you to go out and see some of his massive freakouts. He's part of the alpha male community, and he has a tendency to just shit on others who don't fit his perfect, insecure, low IQ mold. There have been several people that made videos about him. Too Lazy to Try is one, and Critical has even talked about him in the past, but he's actually becoming a big name in the lolcow scene a little bit because he can't control his emotions at all.
Since when did these video game playing, comic book collecting, action figure shelf having, long-haired, 45-year-old virgins start to speak down on studs who are jacked?
A lot of the time, these alpha male personas
Studs that
are
are
just
jacked.
crystals and star signs, but for men,
That came out of
they'll
his
make
mouth.
these grandiose expectations of themselves and others and fake an outline onto how to become successful, and it'll mostly just turn out into being an absolute train wreck.
What happens is we're introduced to a low-frequency environment
Taking
due
Alpha.
to the habits,
losing
the
charge.
vices, and the fears
Maintain current
that are
posture.
coupled with our bad choices.
He's known for flexing the dumbest things and straight up lying about trivial things in his life, like only sleeping 3 hours a night, because for some reason, whenever you look at some of these financial or alpha male gurus out there, they'll always talk about how, oh, well, while you're sleeping, I'm out here grinding, even though, to my understanding, Wes Watson's whole personality is basically just selling a course online, but his course is tells nothing essentially, and you're just there to somehow make 6 figures or more off of his course.
But Wes, if you get up at 2:45, what time do you go to sleep?
Losing Bravo.
A lot of times I go to bed at about 11, 12 o'clock. I just won't even sleep. It means nothing to me. I don't need what people need. I always have the self-talk of, I'm not even human, mother.
So Wes Watson initially got pretty popular because he was making content while he was serving a prison sentence where he basically had a dope deal gone wrong where him and his buddies jumped this dealer and stole from him and choked him out, and then he got arrested for it and was in jail for 7 or 8 or 9 years, something like that. And it somehow projected him into being this internet savvy dude that people are going to buy a course from to look like him and to act like him. And if you go to his website, like any other good alpha male guru, they don't actually tell you anything. It's just all this vapid quote bullshit that just talks about whatever and says you gotta work hard to earn hard, stupid shit like that doesn't actually tell you how they're gonna teach you how to do anything. It's constantly trying to mimic the common man's plights while being surrounded by copious amounts of wealth and living a less strenuous lifestyle. No matter how hard he tries, he'll never come off as a relatable figure to people, and it's mostly because everything about him is so insecure and so glamorized and so pressed up with music and filters and whatnot to make him seem like he's the coolest person in the entire world.
You're addicted to comfort, and when people come to threaten your addiction, you lash out.
When push comes to shove, I guess typically you could just look at their accomplishments and maybe that'll sway you one way or another to choose if buying their course is actually worthwhile. Wes has made some great investments with his wealth by renting literally everything he owns, including his $95,000 beachfront rental property in Miami. And he tries to defend himself for all these stupid monetary habits by saying, well, if you aren't as rich as me, you don't understand these money-making habits, which is really stupid because basically in no world, unless you're like a billionaire, does renting $100,000 a month for multiple properties make any sense.
Why, Wes? Why do you rent these places and not buy them? Do you guys get this? I would never want to live in the same spot for 30 fucking years. And people are like, you could rent it out. Oh yeah. Find someone who's just gonna understand how to even operate at my level. People don't buy a $24 million house. They buy $24 million worth of properties that would bring them more money.
Recently, it seems like he is getting strapped for cash because he's even discounting his course online and people aren't buying it. He tried to run like a Black Friday promotion, but he said that basically, the real trendsetters, the real gurus, they were too busy with their own personal businesses to come out and buy his course. But it's probably because he only takes an annual upfront fee so that he can pocket your money while you flounder around. Now, obviously, he's going to try and masquerade the idea that he's constantly going to be there to help build you up. But I think it's odd to offer a course that is a one-time annual fee for like thousands of dollars, and you're just banking on the idea that this random dude is going to teach you how to be successful.
A lot of people missed out on the Black Friday sale because they just weren't ready. They had to make some quick moves to get the money situated, or they just didn't know that I was going to be running a sale because I never have anything on sale. I only sell the year-long programs.
Wes is incredibly insecure with his own masculinity and persona. He'll get in fights with random people online over the littlest things, including one time when somebody was asking him what makes his man purse so alpha, and he just can't comprehend the fact that wearing a Merce around every day might not be viewed as the most alpha male thing in the entire world.
If I got that bag on me, I'm supposedly not an alpha, but the whole thing is, I own you. You're not the alpha if you're talking about me.
His biggest enemies are anonymous trolls who make fun of him online.
Again,
you can't
that
see
came
the
out of
irony
his
of
mouth.
saying they're all obsessed with him when half of his Instagram stories are calling them out
Ripples,
or molding
fucking
about
wishes
some other situation
between
or
his ears.
controversy that he got himself into. He's literally
Nothing
all
there.
day, every day, calling out random people, and it's for the most trivial shit. And he likes to pretend like he has better things to be doing, but his whole persona is literally sitting in his mansion with nobody around him in some vapid white box and shouting out other people who are making fun of him.
Can some of you guys please use your mirrors at your house, look in them, realize you're so insignificant that the only way you can get views online is to talk about people who get views online. Delusion out here, a lot of delusion out here. You guys are, whoa! Have you been seeing this? This level of delusion where a bunch of beta little bitches think that they're not betas? Do they have mirrors?
He's always trying to prove to people that he's worthwhile, even though when you evaluate his life, it's actually kind of sad. He spends time ranting in his empty rented mansion at some garbage collector shitposting on him about on Reddit all day.
All these beta broads online have crossed a whole new level of delusion. These little boys who couldn't pull a chick to save their lives, they can't fathom how a man who drives a fucking Bugatti and is famous and is jacked living in Miami could pull chicks without paying for them. Oh my God!
While he's also going after all these trolls, he likes to pretend like he doesn't know anything about them, which isn't true, because on different occasions he's called out different clip channels or, you know, parody channels of him. A popular one is to do AI, where it's like Wes working out in a gym and it'll have him and somebody else that's working out with him make out with each other, which is actually kind of nice because it's probably the thoughts going through Wes's head back when he was in prison. And at the same time, there's other ones that will like put a filter on his face during his videos and make it look like he's wearing makeup or make him look like a woman, which makes him very insecure, and he does not like that, and he really molds over it all the time.
If you don't like something or you don't like someone, you wouldn't spend your life knowing everything about that person or spending any time in that person's life. That person would be insignificant to you. You don't like it.
And when you really compare it to some of the other people that I've talked about in the past, it's like the insults that he gets are pretty childish, and I think it's kind of directed towards the fact that Wes will get upset about basically anything. There was a really basic insult that was called gadooshing, which in hindsight's pretty funny, but it completely destroyed Wes's psyche and made him think that these people are like insane and that he's losing his mind trying to comprehend why this is funny, and his reaction just makes everything all the more better.
Real message. There is really a person who wrote me bragging about how big of a Reddit page they have talking shit about me. Like, that's a bad thing. There's that many people that are so worried about me. The guy used the word gadooshing. The guy said that they're on there gadooshing me. And he doesn't know that he's the weirdest person on the face of the earth. Imagine this stud, this ringleader of Reddit reviewers who gadoosh me. Oh, bro, I was too busy making millions of dollars and not knowing who you are at all while you were gadooshing yourself about me.
Wes claims that he has no real life haters and invites them to the gym that he goes to squash any beef if they actually do exist.
I have never met a hater in person because they don't exist. They only exist in grandma's basement, and sometimes I go for round two, but it's kind of iffy what times I go. But the whole thing is you can fully meet me there on the first round, and we can just be friends and talk about me.
Unfortunately for Wes, someone does confront him, and as expected, he kind of just freezes up and tries to make it like a cordial meeting with somebody, even though most of the time whenever he's calling out these people online, he's calling them like little bitches and that they're like beta males and they have no balls and they're not going to show up and they won't prove anything to him. But when somebody actually did show up, he just kind of cowers and tries to make a friend out of the situation. And while there's no like real concrete evidence for this, it feels like a lot of the time whenever Wes is doing some of his rants online, it's just like a made up story to try and put him into the position of being the superior. And a lot of the time you'll hear stories of him talking about how a hater shows up to him, but he gets to flex on him with his wealth or whatever, and it's just kind of sad and pathetic.
Oh God, it must suck. I just saw one of these guys who acts like he hates on me online, but he really loves me. Just doesn't know how to really express it. He wishes he was me. You know, that's the whole point. But I mean, he was on a bike. He's carrying his groceries. He's one of those dudes who oh man, they cannot talk about me because they're just trying to find a reason so badly why Wes ain't a good guy, so they can maybe validate why they suck so bad.
One of Wes's biggest tirades this year was when he was too insecure to accept the vapid and meaningless lifestyle that he pursues during this alpha male incel convention that was hosted by Fresh and Fit, and they brought a bunch of different panel members on that also contribute to different podcasts and whatever that bring up deplorable women and try and peg that as what all women are like is basically what all these shows are.
The definition of success is having a family, having children, and being part of the apparatus of the world. And true wealth is a rejection of materialism. Christ said himself, what good does it benefit a man to gain the entire world at the cost of his soul?
Then the person... Does he have money?
No.
Do you have money?
No. No, I don't have.
How much money do you have?
I don't
Does he
have money. But here's the thing. Why is money valuable?
Do you have money?
What is money valuable for?
I'm just asking. Do you have money?
I just said no. I'm broke. I'm a nobody.
But really, you are?
Yeah.
Is he really broke?
Yeah.
I just want to know. I have to know.
No, I'm not. I'm not one of these rich guys. I don't have a Bugatti. I don't have a Lambo. I don't have a Ferrari.
I just really have to know. Like, how much money you got?
Throughout this whole panel, Wes kept getting his tampon in a wad, and he just like was incapable of having a civil argument with anybody about anything. And the guy that he's beefing with is some like producer dude that's on this podcast called Whatever, which is just like a Fresh and Fit clone, basically. But that dude is like a very religious guy, and he's talking about how his family is the most important thing in life, and is kind of shitting on consumerism. And obviously that strikes a chord with Wes because consumerism is his entire brand and persona.
If you ain't fit, you can't say it's not all about being in good shape.
Why not?
If you don't have money, you can't say it's not all about money.
Yeah, why not?
If he does have money, he can say that.
Why not? Why can't you say it? Why must you have the thing? Hang on. Let me ask the question.
Because hypothetical is hypocritical. Hypothetical is hypocritical.
How do you even know what I was going to...
When all else fails, he just goes prison gorilla mode and has to assert his dominance over anybody that would dare step foot to him that he doesn't deem, you know, superior to him in any respects in life.
Jesus Christ, look at you, bro. You got 10-inch arms and tits. Men don't have tits.
No, the successful mantra of a man who tells you he's reformed from prison. Understand why they might have gone there to begin with. And yes, I do think...
This is the problem in society, is people like this think they can talk to someone like me like that. They really think they can. He knows he wouldn't do shit about it. That's the problem.
I mean, you're the one who got hostile for having a difference of opinion.
Choking and stealing from his weed dealer is just providing for his family. There's rumors that Wes might be in some dire financial straits, so I'm sure there will be some big meltdowns coming soon. If you guys like the Wes Watson saga, let me know, and maybe I'll talk about him a little bit more. He's not very keen of people that discuss him, but I think he's a pretty funny dude, and honestly, most of the fitness industry is pretty good, so maybe there's some other interesting characters that I might bring to light on my channel at some point. But either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.
That's the thing, you guys. I always wanted to have a family.
Hostile UAV established overhead.
Maybe I'll have to date around a little bit.
Could this be career ending for Jojo Siwa? Honestly, yeah. What's crack? It's Evangelina Scott, and welcome to another episode of Caffeine Addiction Can Affect Anyone, even your grandmother. With the subplot this episode being, yes, I did my hair. Yes, it looked nice when I did it. Yes, 5 minutes after I did it, it did this, and it went frizzy. I don't know why it has a mind of its own. But today I want to talk to you about Jojo Siwa, because since the last time I talked to her, there's been a couple of things going on, and one of them might actually be leading towards the end of her entire career as we know it today, unless she does something completely drastic. Not to be like dramatic or anything, but that is how I'm seeing it. So I just went back in my history to check when the last time I talked about Jojo Siwa was, because I have no memory in my brain, apparently. The last time was actually 4 months ago, because one of my videos on her got copyright claimed because I had used her music video, just a section of it, without any audio. That still pisses me off. And before that, it was talking about the shenanigans she was getting into on stage, with the drinking, with the weird dancing while kids might have been there, stuff like that. And of course, we all know all the other stuff that's been going on. Her questionable actions when it came to things she was alleged to have done to XOMG Pop, as well as things that she had said about Colleen Ballinger, and just her general all-round JoJo-ness. But since then, a lot has happened, and it all begins with Beyonce. Now, I don't know if you've been on the internet recently, but over the last while, some stuff has come out about certain celebrities. And there was a whole thing going around on TikTok a while ago where people were saying that celebrities have to thank Beyonce in their speeches, and it became somewhat of a meme, to be honest, because people were saying like Kanye wasn't, you know, interrupting Taylor at the VMAs. He was just saving her from Beyonce, and like everybody saying thank you Beyonce on their essays for college and stuff like that. And JoJo decided to join in on this meme, forgetting that she is actually a famous person, and the meme only kind of works if you're just like nobody and you write it on a napkin for no reason. So she was at a dance awards show and she went up to accept an award, and she decided to thank, who do you think she thanked? Beyonce, of course.
I also have to say thank you to Beyonce, just so that way we keep the dance community safe. Everybody, Beyonce, you got great music. We all love to dance to it. We all love you. Anyways, I am up here to someone had to, and I will be the someone.
This joke of JoJo's, however, didn't land with the audience, and it didn't land with the overall community of the internet, because people were saying she ruined the joke. And as unfunny as I found it, I kind of felt bad for her, and like I know she's allegedly done bad things, but I have a strong sense of cringe, like to a painful degree, that I feel so much pity and sympathy for the person who is being cringe, particularly when they know they're being cringe and they didn't mean to be cringe. And I think she was hoping it would be a funny joke, but the fact that it didn't land, it hurts me emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychically, psychologically, and just all roundly. I feel like that in itself, though, isn't really newsworthy. I mean, it's newsworthy to the degree that you could write an article about it, but I feel like it wouldn't make a whole entire YouTube video, right? Maybe a TikTok, definitely a TikTok, definitely a short, definitely something like that. A whole YouTube dedicated to that is a bit overkill, but that is just the spark for everything that I'm going to be talking about today, because what happened after that joke was that she got quite a bit of backlash for it, as JoJo does anytime she opens her mouth, and then she disappeared for a while. Before we move on with anything else, though, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is a set of world building tools that helps you to create, organize, and store your world setting. And World Anvil is designed to work for a lot of different creative works. So if you're a writer, an artist, a streamer, a historian, a hobbyist, an RPG game master, anything that you need world building for, you can do it in World Anvil. One of the many things that they offer is that they have 25 different world building article templates, which can help inspire your world building with prompts and deepening the world setting as a whole. And amazingly, you can also build interactive maps of your world, so you can actually see and interact with and design your whole world. You can just look at it. For me personally, I've found that this is great because I don't have great mental imagery, so when I'm trying to imagine stuff that's happening in my novel, I find it difficult to visualize where stuff is taking place, but being able to actually look at the setting helps so much, so that I don't write a scene where somehow one of the characters has gotten from this place in the island all the way over to this place in the island in a matter of like half an hour, when that's just physically not possible. They also have really great and powerful tools for RPG game masters and players. For game masters, this provides them a way to plan, play, and present their campaigns. And it has more than 45 supported systems, which includes Dungeons and Dragons, or you can create your own system. And for players, there's character management, character sheets, spell books, basically everything that you need for RPG playing. But for me, the main appeal of this is that it has helped me so much with my writing. They have an all-in-one novel writing toolkit, which helps me with world building, keeping track of the plot, keeping track of characters, all of that. It's definitely a way to improve your writing, and honestly, it's quite fun as well, especially the maps. Right now, you can click the link in my description and use code VANGELINA, and this will give you 51% off any yearly a subscription to World Anvil. Definitely check that out. Would highly recommend it. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on with the next bit. She didn't post on social media, which is very unusual for her because she's extremely active on social media and has been particularly active since the release of Karma and the time leading up to Karma. So she disappeared. She wasn't posting. People were wondering if she was okay. The theories were flying. Had she been stolen away by Beyonce? Was she just doing it for attention? Though speculation didn't really last very long because people did take pictures of her out and about. People did spot her around the place. She was around. People saw her. She just stopped posting on social media. And she even played into the bit like she was wearing a t-shirt saying like, JoJo Siwa, I'm missing. So she wasn't actually gone anywhere, but it did fuel a lot of articles and a lot of talk about her and the Beyonce moment. It is worth noting, although I don't want to go into it too much, but during this time she did go through a breakup with her girlfriend, so this might have also have led into the break that she took from social media. To be perfectly honest, I think it was more a ploy for attention because when she came back, she released a new song, another one. Just what I wanted. And I'm sure there is a market for JoJo Siwa's music, right? I'm sure there's somebody who listens to Karma and is like, this shit slaps. But I am not that girl. So I don't know what to tell you, but her new song, after her break from social media and being missing, she posted this to TikTok herself. And obviously it's meant to be like a bit of a joke, but it was to tease her new song or promote her new song, Iced Coffee. Why is this relevant? You might be asking. Well, because I think this song is a piss take. I think she's just fully joking. I think she knows her music does better when there's something a bit more controversial about it, right? Like, Karma got a lot of attention because it was like a new thing and people wanted to take the piss out of it, right? But then stuff she did after.
Securing Alpha. All objectives locked down. Hold the enemy back. We lost C. We lost B. Securing
I wanted
C.
to show you guys this.
Losing A.
This I want to find the clip of it. I had the clip and I lost it, but
taking Bravo
the
underway.
CEO, the CEO killer's lawyer.
All locations locked down. Dig in and hold them.
Who was talking about people offering to pay for Luigi's legal bills or legal fees, and he was saying like, no, I'm not going to take those legal fees. I'm not going to take those legal fees.
Losing Bravo.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Activating stealth book.
Yes.
A law enforcement official who was briefed on the matter is telling us here at CNN that along with that 3-page handwritten claim of responsibility, as the authorities are referring to it, some might refer to it as a manifesto, investigators are also looking at a spiral notebook of Mangione's that included to-do lists of tasks in order to facilitate a killing, as well as notes justifying those plans. In one passage about the Unabomber, Mangione concludes that using a bomb against his intended victim could, quote, kill innocents, but shooting would be more targeted, using what could be better, I'm quoting now, than to kill the CEO at his own bean counting conference. This is coming as we are learning more about the suspect's life
Bean counting.
beforehand, including a report
muted bean counting conference
from the New York Times that Mangione's mother found a missing persons report about him in San Francisco on November 18th, and also that he stopped communicating with his family and his friends about 6 months ago. Yet apparently no one who knew him and knew that he was missing recognized him in those surveillance photos that have been plastered everywhere for the last several days. Tonight, that's prompting a whole new set of questions about what was happening in Mangione's life behind those smiling photos that we've now seen on social media, and also questions about an injury that he suffered in 2023 and what happened to him ever since. My lead source tonight is the attorney who is representing Luigi Mangione, Thomas Dickey, and it's great to have you here, sir. I just want to say thank you. I know this has been moving very quickly, and you said earlier you were retained today to represent him. And so can you just tell us, how's your client doing in jail tonight?
Well, Caitlin, thank you for having me. As I've been saying all day, if you put yourself, I tell everybody to use their common sense.
I can't believe this guy's name is Dickey. Mr. Big Dickey up here on the stage with me right now to talk about our boy Luigi Mansion.
Here we have a young man who is incarcerated without bail, as you alluded to, and apparently he's going to be charged with murder in the state of New York. To use your common sense, I'm sure he's, it's concerning. That's all I can say.
You've been an attorney for decades. What did you make of the way he went into court earlier, that outburst that he had?
I'm still analyzing that. I was actually on the other side.
The long Dickey of the law.
Side of the wall when he came in, so I didn't hear all that statement. I've been busy all day, so I haven't had a chance to analyze that. So, I'm not going to comment on something, unfortunately, until I can have a chance to hear that in detail and break that down.
Well, being on the other side of it, you were inside that courtroom, of course, and we learned about what happened in there. You're fighting extradition for him to New York. Why are you fighting that? It seems like it's inevitable that he will be sent to New York.
Taking B.
Well, that may be, but again, the Constitution, and I know I keep bringing up that word today, lest we forget about that, but the Constitution gives you certain rights. We need to make informed decision, and the law permits and the Constitution permits that somebody in Luigi's position has the opportunity to look at evidence, make sure the government follows through that process, and that's what we're doing. So, again, I've been in this case probably about 12, 14 hours, maybe whatever, give or take, and I haven't seen a speck of evidence at all. I argued today at the extradition hearing. I still haven't received details about the charges that he's facing in New York. I heard your introduction and looking into that. But so we as lawyers need to make informed decisions.
I haven't seen anything about it. I don't know.
We need to get our hands and our eyes on some evidence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the charges right here. It's murder, a loaded firearm, 2 counts of that, a forged instrument, and criminal possession of a weapon as well. I mean, those are the charges from New York. I mean, so you're not, as you're fighting extradition, you're not actually arguing that the authorities in New York have the wrong guy, are you?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence that they have the right guy. I can tell you that much. So I don't.
Lawyer. No, I haven't seen any evidence, though. I haven't seen any. Just keep going over and over. This guy got the best lawyer, dude. Oh, man. Dickey Justice hits different. You're not wrong. Evio, thank you for the gift sub, by the way. Royal with Cheese, thank you for the too much stuff. Thank you for the 8 months. Mumblecat, thank you for 13 months. Sorry if I've been missing some subs. Remy, thank you for the gift sub to Connor Eats Fans. Girthburgers, thank you for 22 months.
I don't know anything about that. There's identification issues that are present, and so I don't, like I said, this is why I need to look at some things, and they need to convince me. I try to remind people, and it's a shame that we forget about this presumption of innocence that the Constitution gives all Americans, and people don't worry about the Constitution until they're facing charges or accusations against them. Then trust me, Caitlin, the Constitution matters.
And of course it does. And yes, I know you highlighted earlier and emphasized innocent until proven guilty. I understand that. But I read the police report from when he was arrested. He initially gave them a false name. And then when they asked to confirm his identity, he said that he shouldn't have lied to them about it. I mean, that would seem to be that they do have the right person, given that he had a gun on him. He had a fake New Jersey ID that he used to check into a hostel. I mean, is none of that enough for you personally to know that they do have the right guy?
Well, first of all, that's a piece of paper. I know you probably...
The CNN host, well, they literally have the fake ID, they have the ghost gun that he was supposed to be using, they have the clothing and masks that are similar to the shooters, they have this written note denouncing the healthcare industry. First of all, that's a piece of paper.
I can't tell, but I'm 5'6". I could write on that I'm 6'5", and all this other kind of stuff. So that's written on paper. What's nice about the law is we'll have a hearing. I can cross-examine witnesses. And
The short king out here said, listen, I could lie about my height if I wanted to, okay? Just like he could have written down anything, okay?
find out, look at reports and find out what they have.
Man, that's not a gun. That's just a photo of a gun.
And what they don't have. So, again, that's just written on a criminal complaint. Without getting into the details of that, I don't see any evidence of a forgery. They're going to have to at least prove a prima facie case, which is less than the beyond a reasonable doubt. But I need to see these things. Right now I have one piece of paper. And again, so, yes,
Mr. Dickey, have you asked to see this?
That's a kill.
I have a copy of, that's the Pennsylvania complaint. I have a copy of that.
But have you asked to see the evidence?
Near the end. Well, that's what we're good. That's we have a hearing coming up on, I believe, the 23rd. I apologize if I'm in error about that because there's a bunch of dates that have been flying around today. But yes, and like I said, tomorrow I'm going to reach out to the district attorney. It's my intentions and to see how much we can see of this stuff. So today was not about that. We have not had the opportunity to do that today.
And I know you were also unhappy that he was denied bail. Of course, prosecutors were arguing that he is a risk. You know, they either have to talk about, you know, being a flight risk or a risk to the community. Obviously, he was captured about 250 miles from Manhattan. But you said you were retained today. One big question that everyone has is, are you being paid by his family to represent him?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that.
Well, can you say that it's not his family who is asking you to retain him, or retaining you to represent him?
I'm not going to comment on.
Let's go, Dickie. Stay strong, dude. Fucking Chad Springs doesn't bend, break, or fold. I'm not going to comment. Chad, I'm simply not going to comment. Actually, I'm not going to comment.
I'm not going to comment on that.
I'm not going to comment.
That's I've been retained. I'm not court appointed. I've been retained. And that's all I can tell you.
We had seen reports earlier that there was, you know, people were inundating you with offers to help pay for his legal bills. Is that accurate?
I have received some emails. I have not seen them personally, but my understanding from my staff is people are doing that.
That people are reaching out to you and offering to help pay for his legal bills.
That's correct.
Would you accept those offers? I mean, I imagine you maybe have, I don't know, have you ever gotten that before?
Nah, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't.
Nah, I wouldn't take money from those people. Nah.
Why do you think you would not accept that?
I don't know. I just I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable about that. So I don't know. I haven't given that much thought, but I'm not looking. You know, obviously my client appreciates the support that he has, but I don't know. I'd have to look in, but it just doesn't sit right with me, really.
Why do you think they're offering?
I don't know. People, you know, you talk about, you know, the Supreme Court says, you know, all these rich billionaires can give all kind of money to candidates, and that's free speech. So maybe these people are exercising their right to free speech and saying that's the way they're supporting my client.
I have nothing but respect for fucking
Activating
Big Dick
stealth pulse.
Dicky. Well, actually, maybe, did you consider this is people's free speech the same way that billionaires donate a fuck ton of money? That's right, it's just free speech.
You noted there that you said he supports or he appreciates the support that he's getting. Did he acknowledge that when you had a conversation with him earlier about how we have seen this intense public interest in him himself?
Yeah, unfortunately, Caitlin, I can't get into anything that my client and I talk about. So, by law, I'm not permitted to reveal anything that's attorney-client privilege in any conversation that occurs between he and I is simply that.
I understand that, but could you describe just what his demeanor is? You know, you're talking about putting yourself in his shoes, but, you know, did he seem nervous? Did he seem calm? Or how did he come off to you when you met him?
Well, you know, yeah, and if we have a minute, I do want to go back to that bail situation if we have a quick second. But anyway, I've been telling people all day to use their common sense. Here's a young man who's, you know, apparently going to be or has been charged with a very serious, one of the most serious offenses a person could be charged with. He's in prison without bail, as you previously mentioned. And so, you know, I think common sense would say, you know, he's concerned.
Do you plan on representing him only in Pennsylvania or also in New York?
Well, that will depend. I got to see how this process pans out, and if in fact I were asked to do that, I certainly would consider that, and probably.
She's trying so hard to make her look bad. She's trying so fucking hard.
Do that.
Thomas Dickey, I know you've had a very busy day. Thank you for your time tonight and for joining us. And
I love this fucking lawyer. I love this fucking lawyer.
I will, Caitlin. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Hostile marksman got careless.
Also, I'm not sure how many of you guys saw it, but like, this woman just got arrested for saying delay, deny, depose.
Spotted enemy spring
A
mine.
Lakeland woman was charged Tuesday after police said she ended a call to an insurance company with the words delay, deny, depose. In an arrest affidavit, the Lakeland Police Department said officers were contacted by the FBI on Tuesday, December 10th, regarding an alleged threat made over the phone. Near the end of the call, Brianna Boston, 42, had reportedly placed a call to Blue Cross Blue Shield regarding recent medical insurance claims she was denied. The entire phone call was reported according to the affidavit. Just remember, Blue Cross, that's the same company that was trying to say, hey, listen, we know that like heart surgery and like lung surgery and brain surgery, they go over a certain number of hours, but we're only going to cover the anesthesia for some of the procedure, okay? So if your surgery takes more than like, I don't know, like 4 hours, 5 hours, we're not covering the anesthesia past that. You have to pay back for that yourself. And then the CEO got, and they were like, actually, we were just playing. We were joking, dude. We were joking. We were actually just kidding. We were kidding. So that's the same company, just as a reminder, as a quick reminder. I saw on another stream someone calling her words an act of terrorism. When I tell you guys not to Fed post, this is what I mean, by the way. Because this is bullshit, and like a good lawyer, I think, will set her free. But yeah, this is insane that like companies can literally fucking stalk you, which we watched in a separate video. The video about the worker at Frito-Lay's who got injured on site because the equipment was faulty and suffered spinal damage and literally can't even exist anymore without being in perpetual pain, trying to talk about his problems with any media outlets, got him stalked for months and months and months by Frito-Lay. So companies can literally stalk you, threaten you, harass you, but if you say on the phone after being denied any type of treatment or any type of insurance claims, if you say delay, deny, depose, I guess you get 15 years in prison. Police made contact with Boston at her home in Lakeland, where she reportedly admitted to using the word during the call, telling detectives that healthcare companies played games and they deserved karma from the world because they are evil. Look at these fucking dog shit police officers. The police chief, Sam Taylor, said she's been in this world long enough that she certainly should know better than you can't make threats like that in the current environment that we live in and think we're not going to follow up and put you in jail. Pookie, thank you for the prime.
Flashbang.
Let me see here. Boston added she doesn't even own any firearms and was not a danger to anyone.
They're the CIA. You think they were just gonna let you walk all over?
She readily admitted, yeah, that's exactly what I said, but I didn't mean anything by it, Chief Taylor said. Well, you don't get to pull that back
what's going
after
on?
you say it.
Sorry, hey, what's going on, man? You just got Black Ops?
Based on Boston's statement, investigators said that they believe she meant to threaten the insurance company by using the United Healthcare CEO's homicide to
all right, 7,000. That's a good score, man.
To conduct a mass shooting. Mass shooting.
Good score.
First of all,
I was probably going to get off here in a minute, but I'll be back on later.
All right.
I just got to take care of some stuff,
The only people
some
doing the
practical
mass
stuff
killings
around
are the
the
insurance
house.
companies, okay?
My Activision name is
Let's
Sergeant
continue here.
Hugo Stieglitz.
Says,
you want to
also
add
was
me
charged with threats
around
to
there?
conduct a mass shooting or
that'd be
act
cool.
of terrorism, according to the affidavit.
I'm going to actually get going.
Quote, my client is 42, married mother of 3, has never had any criminal charges or
Appreciate you
convictions.
coming
May
by. I'm not
release
sure if
her
you're
on her own
still here or not, but I appreciate you commenting. It's very cool of you.
recognizance. Her attorney, Jim Headley, said to a
But,
judge during
I'll
her
talk to you
first
later.
appearance in court, her bond is $100,000.